It's the power of G. What we doing, come and see. Making bold comments on movies and on TV.
What's going on, y'all? So welcome to another episode of the Wiccaning a Charmed podcast. So this episode is going to be a little bit different because we're not going to be discussing an episode. We're not necessarily going to be discussing specific topics. I just wanted to take a moment and really reflect on my journey with Charmed. So not just my time making content, but even before that, and how it's helped me to watch this show differently and to take it in. So if you're watching the video version of this, I was watching this video where they said that you need to simplify your background. And so I thought I was simplifying it. And, I'm realizing it may be a little busy, but it's okay. It's fine. I think we all like it. And before I get started, I really wanted to take a moment and just say thank you to my lovely patrons over on Patreon. Y'all been rocking with me for a good little minute, okay? And the past couple of months have been so crazy. We've been doing rewatches. We were doing the Christmas watch. We were doing the Halloween watch. Like, everything has just been the past couple of months kind of topsy-turvy. So thank you for sticking in there with me for that. But then thank you for being here since the beginning or whenever you got here. I am so thankful and grateful for your continued support of me. And if you or someone you know would like to join the Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/powerofg. So if you're new here, my very first episode of Charmed was Charmed Again, okay? Charmed Again was my very first introduction to the world of Charmed. And, thinking back on it, that's wild. That's absolutely insane. I've told this story before, but the very first scene of Charmed I ever saw was Prue's funeral. That was the first time I was introduced to Charmed. That was the first time that I ever knew that the show existed, was watching my girls at Prudence's funeral. And I've tried to, over the years, sort of evaluate if that had any kind of impact on the way that I watch this show, right? And what I realized as I got older is I've always felt a lot more connected to Paige because she and I came in at the same time. I was introduced to the show at the time that she came in. She was the new girl on the block. I was the new kid on the block. I was 11. I was 10 because it was 2001. I was 10. So Papa is kind of elderly, but that's neither here nor is it there. I remember explicitly just looking in wonder because you got to remember what's happening in Charmed Again, okay? And if you want a full breakdown of that, then you can head on over to an earlier episode in this very podcast where we discuss Charmed Again parts 1 and 2. Girl, it was something about the S that had me a little, tripped up. But that episode is so chaotic. That set of episodes is so chaotic because you got Paige coming in. You got the revelation that she's their sister. You got the source trying to get my girl to turn evil by taking a human life. Like, there's so much happening in that set of episodes, and for that to be the first time that you ever watch a show is absolutely wild, especially because you're watching this grief happen in this family, right? And then as I got older, I'm starting to realize, or I did start to realize, they didn't have time to grieve. I'm talking about grieving, right? These people did not have time to grieve. They literally were crying over Prue 1 minute and then trying to fight the source the next. There was no downtime. There was no moment where they could just stop and say, you know what? We just want to cry. No, they literally had to be on it. And so I think about that, and I think about the chaos that I walked into with that show. And to think that 25 years later, almost, I am still talking about this show, still talking about the impact it had on me. And it just blows my mind. It blows my mind to think about the fact that for me, I have been watching this show almost as long as I have been alive. And it just, I don't know. That just does something to me to sit back and think about. So speaking of the impact that this had on the way that I watch the show, I want to talk a little bit about the way that I used to watch this series, right? Because I think that it's really important to talk about that in order to kind of talk about the evolution that I've had with it. So the way that I used to perceive Charmed, right, from my 10-year-old brain going into being a teenager, whatever else, I was always very heavily focused on the magic. That was what I wanted to see. I wanted to see Piper blowing stuff up. I wanted to see Phoebe levitating. I wanted to see the orbing and the throwing people with the telekinesis of Prue. Like, that was what I was clocked in for, was the magic of it all and the grandeur of the demons being vanquished and exploding. And I still remember in Long Live the Queen when I saw Phoebe blow up Cole. Like, yes, it was an emotional moment, but I remember being like, oh my God, he destroyed the whole room. That was what my mind was focused on at that time. And so I think that what they kind of did for me was I had favorite characters for different reasons, right? So I loved Piper because she was so funny and because she was blowing stuff up. And I was like, oh, I just want to do this. And I just want, people to just go flying across the room because I blew them up and whatever else. So they go explode. Like, that was what I wanted, right? I didn't want to explode people, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to be able to blow things up. That's not the point. The point is, like, those were the things that I loved about her character at that time, right? And so then Phoebe was just funny to me. Like, I've always been like a comedy person. I love to laugh. I love a good kiki. And so for me, Phoebe was always that person that could make me laugh no matter what. She could make me cry. She could make me laugh, whatever else. And so she was, and plus, okay, levitation and premonition were always my favorite powers because I love the drama of it. I love the drama of like leaping into the air like a lizard, right? And then, that was so petty. And then, just the way she would hunch those shoulders when she would get a premonition and it would go in and then it would come back out. I loved that about that character. And that was the way that I watched that show. So not to say that I wasn't, because I'll be honest, there's some stuff is kind of like a blur of that time in my life. And I couldn't tell you to save my life what I was thinking, but I know that I read a journal that I had from back in the day and I wrote, I miss Prue. I don't like Paige. And it's so embarrassing to say, but at the same time, I was like 13, 14, something like that. So I was a child. Like, that was how my mind worked. My brain worked very much from the perspective that I like this thing, right? So you fast forward that to when I become an adult and I start interacting with the Charmed fandom. Girl, listen, this is where things take a little bit of a turn, okay? So we need to kind of get into my introduction into social media, right? So I got on social media and I started interacting with other Charmed fans. And that was the first time that I realized that other people see things different from how I see them. And I would talk to so many different people who would say things and I would be like, that doesn't make any sense because that's not what happened. Now, let me also say this about myself because I think this is very important for me to say. I am a person who loves to just be stupid, who loves to make funny jokes. Like, when I say be stupid, I mean make funny jokes. I like to just say stuff that kind of doesn't make sense. Like, because in my mind, I felt like everyone was going to know that it didn't make any sense. Like, I thought everyone knew it was a joke and that was going to be what we were in on. And being on social media started to teach me that people don't understand when things are jokes. And sometimes you have to explicitly say them. Now, another part of that is I definitely, especially when I was younger, I was just out here just wilding, talking about this show. I would say stuff that now I'm just like, Galen, come on now, buddy. Come on now. But I think that helped me to grow up as a person, but it also helped me to grow up with the way that I was watching this show. Because I was making very surface level statements. I have no lie to tell y'all. I was making very surface level statements. There was a good chunk of time where I was the president of the Phoebe Hating Club. Okay. I promise you that I was the president, the CEO, the founder, the whatever else. And I do not understand why now, but I kind of do at the same time because, like I said, I was watching the show from a very immature place, a very childish place, and that carried over into my adulthood. And so Phoebe was selfish, and Phoebe was this, and it was like I almost zeroed in on her in some instances. And then there were some times, like with Piper, where I just could not stand that character. And so people would try to be, And then part of it, if I'm being honest with myself and being honest with y'all, there was a bit of the oppositional defiance disorder kind of cutting in a little bit, because it was like the more people would just like blindly tell me how much they loved her, the more I was just like, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna do it with you today. I'm not gonna. And I have to admit that, because I think that's such a huge part of where I am now as a person and as a content creator. I think that looking at things through that lens of you're not going to tell me what's the best definitely hindered a lot of my thought processes and kept me from, and that even extends to my personal life. Like, that thought process has hindered me in so many things. And even though it's still there just a little bit, I'm also more open and to seeing why people think things, because I think that that's an important way that we watch television. And I think that the way that we are on the inside is going to dictate the way that we take in media. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. Now, okay. Phoebe was my favorite when I was younger. I told y'all that before. Piper, I love me some Piper. I love the two of them for completely different reasons, right? So as I started getting older and I started to evaluate the show a little bit more, I started to gravitate more towards Paige. Now, as a bit of a detour, okay, there is something else that I think was very impactful. I started making genuine connection, right, with other people. So it was no longer just me talking into a void. It was no longer me just saying stuff and hoping that people liked it. It became conversations that I was having with people that I respected and people that I was getting to know. They were getting to know me, and they would see the person that I was, and they're like, are you sure you really think, like, I really would have those discussions with people where they challenged me on things. And once I started having those discussions with people, and once I started hearing other people's perspectives on why they like certain characters or why they didn't, or why they like certain storylines, it started opening my eyes to, I need to be more, especially if I'm going to be on the internet talking about it, I need to be more intentional with the words that I'm using. And I need to be more specific with the thoughts that I have instead of just these general things. And just as an aside, I just really want to say I have met some of the most amazing people in my life talking about this show on social media. I've met people that I have become deep friends with. I have met people that I still talk to this day. I have met so many people that mean so much to me now. And to think that I might have never ever met these people had it not been for the show, had it not been for me talking about this show. And it, it it's such a weird feeling because, I know people say internet friends for people. Of course, we all have internet friends, but I've met people that I genuinely cannot imagine my life without. And even people that I may not be as close to anymore or close to at all, I don't regret ever meeting them, because I just feel like my life is so much different than what it would have been had I not. And so I'm just forever thankful and grateful for the opportunities that I've had to meet people around the world, not even just close, like people around the world. And that has been, I think, one of my favorite parts of all of this, has just been the ability to get to know people and to form connections that truly have helped to shape me, and their support has meant everything to me. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I genuinely don't think that I would have ever gotten into content creation if I hadn't met a lot of the people that I met. So I just wanted to say that. I know that that's kind of off the beaten path, but I really wanted to stop and I wanted to acknowledge that, because that has just been the biggest chunk of what has made this a worthwhile experience. But we will come back to that. Let's go forward. Child, not the light coming off. The light said, baby, you being a little too dramatic, and I'm gonna jump right on off of here because no ma'am. Now, with the amazing connections that I've made with people, I've also started to realize a lot of other things about people. Earlier I was talking a little bit about how people see things differently than I. They see things very different. And what I think talking about this show on social media taught me was that people are very adamant in their thought processes. They do not like to be challenged. They don't like to be budged. They don't like anything, right? And I don't know how to feel about that because I used to get very angry about it because I was very much one of those people too that was like, well, this is what I think and this is why it's right and whatever else. But what I started learning was I'm not always right, right? Like that, my limited view of this show, of anything, is just that it's limited. It's something that is based off of my personal experience. It's something that I am going through life believing because I just thought that it was real because I made it into a headcanon. But I've encountered a lot of people who aren't quite ready to get out of that phase, right? So they may still absolutely think the same thing that they think. And it's the same for all of us. Like you may hear something that is contrary to what you believe, and you'll be like, no, I don't think that that really changes that, but I understand why someone would say it. And you still just keep your belief and you go on. But there are people who will argue about this show, and what I had to learn is that for some people, it is very deep and it's very personal. So for them, and when I say it, I mean their experience with this show, their experience watching this show. And so for them, when they see someone that's criticizing it from their perspective too harshly, it feels like they have to protect it because you're protecting this thing that I love. You're protecting this thing that got me through these hard times. You're attacking this thing that helped me at the lowest point in my life, right? And I feel like now I'm at a place where I try to balance the response of like, I get why you're saying that. And then just blatantly, I will call out when I feel like someone is making something up, because there's sometimes where people just have head canons of things that did not happen. And I'm sorry if y'all can hear that cat, but he wants to come in here and I'm not gonna let him because he will knock down this thing. But yeah, so it, for me, it was very much one of those things where I had to learn, okay, we are, we differ. And I had to learn to give other people grace with the same expectation that they're able to give me grace, right? Now, what that shift taught me though was I can't expect other people to hear out my perspective and then I'm not willing or able to hear out their perspective. So it really started to show me that I was not as open-minded as I thought about this show. So what you've been seeing kind of the past couple of, I would say at least months, is I've really been kind of focusing in on Phoebe. Really the past year, I would say that I've been focused in on the sisters as a whole, how they interact, how their past helped to shape the person that they are or hindered, their shaping. But I think the reason that I really started focusing in on Phoebe the past couple of months is because she reminds me of myself. And there's so many things that she and I have in common, and that is not a good thing. And the way that we perceive the world, the way that we perceive ourselves, the way that we interact with other people because of the way that we perceive ourselves, it's one of those things where it's made me it's made me reflect a lot, and it has made me see things about myself that I didn't before. So going back and rewatching this show and just sort of reframing things for myself has been so odd. Like when you think about the fact that this is a non-traditional family, right? When you think about the fact that our girls really grew up without a father or without a mother, when you think about how much of their life is actually different from the people around them and how that affected them, I'm like, oh, no wonder my girls were going through it. Like they're literally like even something as small as me saying out loud that Phoebe is a non-traditional student. it had never occurred to me before that until we were talking about it one day. And I realized when Phoebe went back to college, she was like 24. She was, I want to say that Phoebe was like 23, maybe, when she went back to college. And I'm just like, Phoebe is a non traditional student. Oh my God. And when I realized that, it just made me watch this show so differently and think about how she must have felt like a fish out of water with all these 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. And even though she's not much older than them, she's older than they are with this first experience that they're having. So that made me start to understand and appreciate more of the fact that she has a different level of focus. She's got this intense desire to get through this and to get this done, where they're here to have fun and party and things like that. And it just, I don't know, there was just something about that just made me think, wow, this show is a lot deeper than I actually thought. So, over the past couple of years, I feel like I've sort of been making, number one, the same statements, but I feel like I make statements and people will say it's not that deep. And I'm like, yeah, it really is. Like it actually is. Because I feel like if you want to understand the characters, and I feel like if you want to be able to critique them, evaluate them, whatever the case may be, you have to be able to understand those parts of their personality. Now, speaking of critique, right? Content creation. That's something that I think very deeply in my soul that had I not started making content around this show, I think I might have still been watching it somewhat the same way. I think, of course, some things would have been different, but I think that as a whole, I would have been watching the show from the same perspective and the same thoughts on the characters and things like that. Because watching it in the rewatch over on the Patreon, right? And making content about it on TikTok and YouTube to look at this show through a different lens. Because I would start thinking about things and I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Or wait a minute, just because I'm saying this, that doesn't, like, I started putting pieces together, but more than that, I started to question myself. And not question myself in the way that, like, should I be doing this? Although that has been quite the journey. But it made me start to question my long held beliefs. It made me start questioning the way that I view these characters. And one of the things that I feel like recently, for the past like couple of months, I've really been focusing in on is the fact that Piper is not allowed to be her own character because she's always something in relation to other people. Even when people say, oh, Prue had to die so that Piper could grow, I just think that undermines Piper so much. But it was hard for me to put words to that at first because I was like, how do you verbalize something that you're not even fully aware of? So I think that making content forced me to start using words and verbiage that were specific to how I felt. And if I didn't know it right off the top of my head, I had to find it. So I think that that's not only helped me to be more secure in the way that I approach content creation, but I think it helps me to critically think a little bit better. I think that this show and the way that we talk about it online has helped me to put words to my thoughts and take time to put words to my thoughts, not just say things for the sake of saying them. So it, and that's the other thing is like being able to admit that kind of stuff, to admit that at one point I was just saying stuff, or admit that at one point I didn't fully know what I was talking about, or that I was saying this because I didn't like this character. That's difficult. That is very difficult to do. And it takes, I think, a level of, okay, I feel like now, because I was going to say it takes a level of humility, but then I was like, yeah, I'm very humble. That's weird to say, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it takes a level of insight. And it was one that I did not have before. It was one that I absolutely was not in possession of. So this show has helped me, and talking about it with y'all has helped me so much. So I know that this episode wasn't quite as structured as some of our other ones, but that was kind of how I wanted it. I wanted to be able to take you on this journey with me and give you some insight into how I've changed and grown up and evolved as a person, and how that has evolved with the way I watch this show. How they both kind of, are the reason that the other exists. I've grown up with this show, and this show has grown with me. And it just, I don't know, there's something so beautiful about it. And I think it's important to stop and take these moments to reflect on these kind of things, because I think that's the beauty of TV. And I think that that's what makes it so important for us to be able to look inside. Because if I couldn't tell you about the person that I used to be, there wouldn't be a reason, it would seem like I'm just some perfect person who has these ideas and I've always had them, when that's not true. They formed over time and I had to let them form over time. So, with that being said, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode on up here. Let me know what you think about Charmed. Has your viewpoint of it evolved? Do you feel like you've changed for the better since you started watching this show? Do you feel like your thought processes have evolved? I cannot wait to hear from you. And our next episode is going to have a very special guest. We are going to have Pamara Fifth from RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under, and she is going to be talking to us about some Charmed. She's going to be giving us a little bit of Drag Race insight, and I can't wait to share that episode with y'all because it was so fun. So I will see you next time with our very special guest. In the meantime, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/powerofg, or you can follow me anywhere on social media at They Call Me Mr. G. I hope that y'all had as much fun as I did today, and I will see you in the next one. Y'all have a great day. Bye.